The year is 1946. A newborn baby girl enters the world. One of 12 children in a family so poor that, as the story goes, parents paid the doctor who delivered her with a sack of cornmeal. That little girl was Dolly Rebecca Parton, a name that would one day shine on billboards, theaters, movie screens, and concert stages around the world over the decades. Dolly Parton became far more than a country music star. She became an institution. She has sold over 100 million records globally, earned 11 Grammy Awards from nearly 50 nominations, built Dollywood into one of America's most beloved theme parks, and created a literacy charity, the Imagination Library, which has sent more than 200 million free books to children around the world. But beyond the wigs, rhinestones, and witty one-liners, Dolly has always carried a quieter, more private side. For 30 years, she cultivated a dazzling public image that millions felt connected to, while carefully guarding parts of herself from the spotlight. That tension between Dolly the icon and Dolly the woman is part of what makes her story so compelling. This isn't a tale of scandal or deception. It's one of survival. It's about a girl from the Smoky Mountains who learned early on that sometimes you have to play a role in public to protect what truly matters in private. Dolly's song may have been coat of many colors, but her real life was woven from far more complex and hidden threads. To understand the full picture, it helps to know just how far she came. Dolly Parton was born on January 19, 1946, in Locust Ridge, Tennessee, a small community near Pittman Center in the Great Smoky Mountains. She was the fourth of 12 children born to Robert Lee Parton, a sharecropper and construction worker, and Avie Lee Parton, who held the family together through music and deep faith. They were so poor at the time of Dolly's birth that her father famously paid the doctor with a sack of cornmeal, an anecdote Dolly has retold with a smile throughout her life. Never hiding her humble origins, those early years of poverty later became the heart of some of her most beloved songs, including Coat of Many Colors, which tells the story of a jacket her mother made from scraps. Life in that tiny one-room cabin was loud, crowded, filled with music. Lee taught her children Appalachian folk songs, and Dolly soaked up the hymns she heard every week in church. By the age of 10, she was already singing on local radio stations in Knoxville. Just 3 years later, she stepped onto the stage of the Grand Ole Opry for the first time, introduced by none other than Johnny Cash. Even at that young age, Dolly knew where she was headed. She once said, "I always knew I was meant for more than a cabin in the woods. I just didn't know how far I'd have to go to get there." True to that belief, the very day after she graduated from high school in 1964, she packed her bags and headed for Nashville, determined to chase her dream. The early days were tough. Nashville was overflowing with hopefuls, and Dolly's high, twangy mountain voice didn't fit the mainstream sound at the time. But she had persistence, and that turned out to be her greatest weapon. She signed with Monument Records, where she was initially pushed toward pop music. It didn't take long for her to find her footing in country. Her big break came when Porter Wagoner, host of the popular Porter Wagoner Show, invited her to perform on television in 1967. That partnership turned Dolly into a household name. They recorded hit duets, toured extensively, and built a loyal fan base. But behind the matching outfits and smiling performances, Dolly was already showing signs that she wasn't content being anyone's sidekick. In 1974, she made the painful decision to leave Wagoner's show and pursue a solo career. To soften the blow, she wrote, "I Will Always Love You," a farewell ballad that would go on to become one of the most iconic songs in history. That moment summed up Dolly's double life perfectly. Sweet on the surface but shaped by tough choices, ambition, and a need to define her identity on her own terms. The girl who started life with nothing but a sack of cornmeal birthright was on her way to becoming a global star. But fame required more than talent. It demanded a carefully constructed image, and that's where Dolly's second life really began to take shape. Ask Dolly Parton about her style, and she'll tell you, "It costs a lot of money to look this cheap," delivered with a wink. That line captures the calculated brilliance of her persona. In the 1970s, country music was still dominated by men in cowboy hats, and women were expected to play nice and stay modest. Dolly blew that expectation wide open. She wore sky-high wigs, bright red lipstick, and rhinestone-studded gowns that sparkled like fireworks under stage lights. Her look, she once confessed, was inspired by a woman from her hometown. People gossiped about her, called her trashy, but Dolly remembered her boldness and thought, "Hey, if that's trashy, then trashy sure looks fun." But none of it was accidental. The glitz wasn't just for show, was armor. By creating a version of herself so dazzling and over the top, she gave people something to focus on, something bright enough to distract them from digging too deeply. Behind that armor, she could keep her real life, her relationships, her struggles. Her inner self safely protected. She took this commitment to her image so seriously that she's admitted to sleeping in her makeup, just in case she had to rush outside in an emergency and still look like Dolly. It may sound extreme, but for her, it was a way of surviving in a world that discards women the moment they appear too ordinary or too real. Of course, Dolly, ever savvy, found a way to turn that pressure into power. Make a difference while you're here. 2. Is part of her magic, doing extraordinary things while pretending it's no big deal. Tabloids could speculate all they wanted about plastic surgery or hidden truths, but Dolly was always one step ahead, turning rumors into punchlines. If something's bagging, sagging, or dragging, I'll tuck it, suck it, or pluck it, she once joked. In that moment, she took control of the narrative, flipping potential vulnerability into power. What makes her so endlessly fascinating is how she walks the tightrope between openness and mystery. She'd gladly chat about her wigs, her elaborate beauty routines, or her famously exaggerated figure. But when it comes to her deepest beliefs, her personal struggles, or her marriage, she draws the line. The public got what she allowed them to see, never more, never less. It wasn't deception, it was self-preservation. By building Dolly, the over-the-top sparkling persona, she created a shield that allowed her real self to exist quietly behind it. And yet her contradictions kept stacking up. She was the queen of country music, yet famously posed for Playboy. She wrote gospel music and spoke often about her faith, while also seeking and achieving pop and rock success. She was generous, giving away millions to causes she believed in. Yet behind the scenes, she was an astute business operator who built an empire under her own name long before personal branding was a buzzword. The wigs and rhinestones weren't just costume. They were strategy. They let her live 2 lives, one for the crowd, one for herself. By the time her wigs were skyscraper high and the sequins nearly blinding, Dolly Parton had become not just a person, but a symbol. She was a brand. But like any brand, hers came with fine print, written in invisible ink. That fine print begins with her marriage, one of the most enduring mysteries in her story. On May 30th, 1966, she married Carl Thomas Dean in a tiny, quiet ceremony, attended only by her mother, the preacher, and the preacher's wife. For nearly 60 years they remained married, and yet for most fans, Carl might as well have been a myth. He avoided red carpets, gave no interviews, and lived entirely out of the spotlight. Some fans even wondered if he existed at all, or if they had quietly split long ago. Dolly leaned into the rumors with a laugh, once joking that she had a mannequin in the closet she called Carl. The truth was much simpler. Carl just didn't want to be famous. While Dolly built theme parks, starred in movies, and toured the globe, Carl ran an asphalt paving company and lived a quiet life in Nashville. Their relationship, Dolly and glitter, Carl in jeans and work boots, was one of the most vivid examples of her double life. Then there's her faith. She's never been shy about being a Christian. Gospel music was part of her upbringing in the Smoky Mountains, and she's recorded gospel albums, spoken about her daily prayers, and written songs rooted in spiritual themes. And yet, in 1978, she stunned conservative fans by posing for Playboy. She wasn't new just wearing the iconic bunny suit, but it was enough to cause a stir. Dolly later brushed it off, saying she looked cute back then, and figured, why not flaunt it? The tension Bible in one hand, bunny ears in the other, is classic Dolly. She's never let herself be boxed in. Her songwriting reflects that complexity. On one single night in 1973, she wrote both Jolene and I Will Always Love You. One is a plea driven by jealousy and insecurity. The other is a graceful goodbye full of love and strength. To write both in the same breath suggests a woman fluent in navigating emotional opposites, a living embodiment of her double life. And then there's her business empire, hiding in plain sight. Dollywood may seem like a wholesome theme park with rides and cinnamon bread, but it's also the center of a vast business network. Dolly owns multiple companies under the Dollywood brand, has invested in media and publishing, and carefully steered her image for decades. Yet she often downplays this side of herself, calling herself just a simple country girl, all while making multi-million-dollar moves behind the scenes. It's another layer of the double life, the folksy charm masking the sharp business acumen. Her philanthropy, too, is handled with the same blend of sincerity and humility. In 1995, she launched the Imagination Library, which has now mailed over 200 million free books to children. She's funded scholarships, paid for disaster relief, and famously donated $1 million to help fund COVID-19 vaccine research at Vanderbilt University. Still, she often waves off praise, saying she just tries to do some good when she can. And maybe that's the essence of Dolly Parton, not a split personality, but a carefully balanced blend of contrasts. She's soft and tough, private and public, sacred and playful. The woman in the sparkly gown isn't hiding something beneath the surface. She's choosing what to reveal, and when, not to deceive, but to survive and to shine on her own terms. Dolly said, "Give back if you've been blessed, and I've been more blessed than I ever deserved." She meant it, but even her generosity holds a deeper truth. The public sees the donations and free books, but Dolly sees something else: a mission. Rooted in the poverty of her childhood and the faith she rarely talks about in depth. By the 1980s and 90s, she was living two lives, one brilliantly public, the other fiercely private, both humming in harmony. But keeping two lives going isn't easy. It sounds glamorous, like slipping between costumes, but really, it's more like juggling fire. And Dolly managed it for decades. The question is, why hold on to that separation for so long? There are a few reasons, and none of them are shallow. First, there's the brutal pressure of fame. Imagine waking up every day knowing millions of people think they're entitled to your secrets, your heartbreaks, your every choice. Dolly knew early that fame could devour you if you didn't set limits. So she created a version of herself bigger than life, sparkling and loud, and let that version take the hits. Meanwhile, she kept her real self safe behind the curtain. Sequins, in her case, were self-preservation. Second, there's the matter of gender. Dolly came up in country music during a time when women were expected to smile, stay sweet, and know their place. She flipped that script by exaggerating every expectation. The big hair, the tight clothes, the over-the-top makeup hit was a strategy. She used humor about her own body to take control of the narrative. If critics called her cheap or shallow, she'd beat them to it with a joke. That's power. And that power allowed her to climb ladders that might have been pulled out from under a more serious woman. Then there's control, maybe the most important factor of all. Dolly wasn't just a singer with a pretty voice. She was a songwriter, a producer, a businesswoman. She held on to her publishing rights, a move that paid off massively when Whitney Houston's version of I Will Always Love You became a global smash. While the public focused on the sparkles and the sass, the private Dolly was signing contracts, building businesses, and playing the long game with the kind of clarity and precision most stars never master. Still, that double life came with a price. Secrets fuel speculation. For decades, tabloids tried to pull back the curtain rumors about her marriage, her sexuality, alleged affairs with co-stars. Dolly laughed it off, saying, "If they're talking about me, at least they're leaving someone else alone." But constantly deflecting and managing your image isn't light work. The toll builds up. There were cracks in the glitter. In interviews from the 1980s, you can catch her pausing just a beat too long before answering questions about Carl Dean or the loneliness of life on the road. In her 1994 autobiography, Dolly, My Life and Other Unfinished Business, as she revealed moments of deep self-doubt, even depression. She admitted there was a period in the 1980s when she contemplated suicide. That revelation reminded the world that beneath the wigs and wit was a woman under immense pressure trying to hold herself together. So why keep it up? Why continue living in two worlds when it was clearly exhausting? Because the alternative, giving it all away, was worse. Dolly once said, "I'm not going to limit myself just because people won't accept the fact that I can do something else." By keeping her public and private self separate, she gave herself room to grow, to experiment, to heal, and to endure. And it worked. Think of it like this. When fans saw Dolly in a rhinestone jumpsuit cracking jokes about her figure, they were entertained, comforted, inspired. When she went home, took off the wig, and sat beside Carl Dean on their front porch in Nashville, she was protected. Both parts of her life mattered. They just didn't have to merge. But maintaining that balance for over 30 years was a tightrope walk. And like all tightrope walks, the wind sometimes picked up, the rope swayed. And even Dolly Parton had to fight to stay steady. Dolly's private self occasionally peeked out from behind the curtain, quietly reminding the world that she was more than just sequins and sass. By keeping Carl Dean, her husband, out of the spotlight, she preserved a part of her life untouched by fame. It was always a dual act. Dolly Parton, the global superstar, and Dolly Parton, the private woman who cooked dinner at home. That balance kept her grounded in an industry that often devours its own. Few fans knew about her battle with depression in the 1980s, a dark chapter she revealed later in her memoir, My Life and Other Unfinished Business. While she masked her struggles with humor and relentless energy, behind the sparkle she was dealing with serious health issues, heartbreak, and emotional exhaustion. When she finally opened up about those moments, it only confirmed what some had long suspected, that the Dolly we saw on stage was just half the story. Her glittering mask wasn't deception, it was strategy. It let her give the public exactly what they craved, while holding on to what she needed most. She could be the image of Southern hospitality, warm, kind, generous, family-oriented, but she was also daring, edgy, and completely unafraid to shock the world. Who else could donate millions to children's literacy and medical research, and also pose for Playboy twice? Once in 1978, and again at 75 for her husband's birthday, saying with a wink, "I still had the boobs and the waistline." That's Dolly Sharp, self-aware, and totally in control of her narrative. Her philanthropy is just as iconic as her wardrobe. The Imagination Library started as a small local program and grew into a global initiative that sent over 200 million books to children around the world. She donated $1 million to help fund Moderna's COVID-19 vaccine research in 2020, prompting fans to half joke, half cry. Dolly Parton is the reason we can go outside again. And just when you think you have her figured out, she pivots. Though she built her empire on country music, Dolly has never been afraid to cross lines. In the 1980s, she moved into pop with hits like 9 to 5 Inches, and Here You Come Again. Then in 2023, at 77 years old, she released a full rock album titled Rockstar, featuring duets with legends like Paul McCartney, Elton John, and Stevie Nicks. She only made the record because she was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and felt she had to earn it. That's pure Dolly when challenged. She doesn't just rise to the occasion, she sparkles all over it. At the heart of it all, one truth stands out. Dolly does what Dolly wants. She's never played by anyone else's rules. She can be wholesome and sexy, humble and flamboyant, deeply private and larger than life all at once. That's the paradox that makes her endure. Dolly's story is a true American fairy tale. Born in a one-room cabin in the Smoky Mountains, paid for with a sack of cornmeal. She grew up without electricity, without plumbing, and often without shoes. And yet, those roots became the foundation for one of the most remarkable careers in music history. Her so-called double life wasn't built on scandal, it was built on survival. She created a dazzling public persona to light up the world, while protecting her inner self from the burn of that same spotlight. For 3 decades, she lived that double life with grace, fooling no one and everyone at the same time. And maybe that's the real takeaway. Dolly Parton shows us you don't have to be just one thing. You can be glitter and grit, faith and freedom, fantasy and truth. You can be the icon and the individual, and you don't have to apologize for either. So when we say Dolly Parton lived a double life for 30 years, what we really mean is she lived life entirely on her own terms, and in doing so, she didn't just become a superstar. She became legend, a living myth whose story will be told long after the last rhinestone fades.